So remember, sometimes the journey is across a city, and sometimes the journey happens without taking a single step. Place A to place B, or state A to state B. Both can point to sein. Very good. Now let's put the two main sein patterns side by side. We have already seen that sein, to be, is often used in two important situations. First, a change of place, and second, a change of state. They may look completely different, but both describe a transition. Something is different after the action. Let's begin with a change of place. Look at Sie ist nach Berlin gefahren. She traveled to Berlin. The main verb is fahren, to travel or go by vehicle. Before the journey, she is in one place. Then she moves, and after the journey, she is in Berlin. So we can imagine place A, movement, place B. The location changes. That is why this use of fahren builds the perfect with sein. Now compare that with a change of state. Look at Das Wetter ist kalt geworden. The weather became cold. The main verb is werden, to become. Its Partizip 2 is geworden, become. Here, nothing travels to a new destination. The weather is not packing a suitcase. Instead, the condition changes. Before, the weather is warmer. Then a change happens. After, the weather is cold. So we can imagine state A, change, state B. The location stays the same, but the state becomes different. Now compare the two examples. Sie ist nach Berlin gefahren. This is change of place. And das Wetter ist kalt geworden. This is change of state. In the first example, the subject ends up in a new location. In the second example, the subject ends up
Hola.
in a new.
Hola, ¿cómo van, gente? Bienvenido al vivo. ¿Cómo van? Uy, se suscribieron. Muchas gracias por esa suscripción. Vamos a tratar de transmitir casi todos los días. Estoy transmitiendo desde mi celular.
Condition. So the two patterns are place A to place B and state A to state B. Both describe a clear transition, and both can point to sein. This gives us a useful question when choosing the helper verb. Did the subject move to a genuinely new place? Or did the subject enter a genuinely new state? If the answer to one of these questions is yes, sein is often the right.
Hola, la gente. Uy, 10 personitas viéndome. Hey, gente, gracias por estar acá viéndome. Quédense viendo el en vivo. Conózcanme. Soy nuevo youtuber. Y estoy aquí para ustedes.
Algún día, pero no ahora. Precisión superior al 99%. Blue. En Carulla y Éxito, miércoles de carnes frescas.
Hola, Jordán.
De descuento en cortes
¿Cómo vas?
de carne de res y cerdo. Architect por Jorge. Éxito y en architect.com. Question when choosing the helper verb. Did the subject move to a
Hola, Esther. ¿Cómo vas?
genuinely new place? Or did the subject enter a genuinely new state? If the answer to one of these questions is yes, sein is often the right helper. So remember the visual difference. Change of place, the location changes.
Bien, ¿y tú? ¿Cómo te sientes? Hola. Hello, people. How's it going? Welcome to my channel. Hola, me llamo Carlos. ¿Cómo están? Hola, mía. ¿Cómo van? Bueno, para las personas que no saben de dónde soy de Colombia.
Change of state, the condition changes. Two different journeys, but the same important helper verb, sein. Keep going. Now let's look at a small group of verbs that deserve special attention. Most of the time, our rules help us choose between haben, to have, and sein, to be. But some important verbs are best learned together with their helper verb. They do not always show an obvious journey from A to B. So for these verbs,
Qué bueno.
the safest approach
¿De qué parte de
is
Venezuela?
learn the verb, learn its Partizip zwei, and remember that it uses sein. Let's begin with the verb sein. Its Partizip zwei is gewesen, been. So the complete pair is sein, gewesen. And in the perfect, the verb itself also uses a conjugated form of sein. For example, ich bin müde gewesen. I was tired. This form may look a little unusual, but the important thing is sein.
I've been learning Spanish on Duolingo for free. Me encanta la playa.
Real también está en camino hasta tu mesa. Corona, chocolate colombiano hecho con cacao 100% real. Dolor de espalda no detenga la celebración. Alívialo con Goles Forte, con su forma superior es 5 veces más rápido.
Para tener la mejor experiencia con Gillette Gel, sigue estos pasos. Gira el disco de la base y cuando salga esta pequeña cantidad.
The sein group. Now look at bleiben.
Oh, ya. Qué bueno.
To stay. Its Partizip 2 is geblieben, stayed. For example, wir sind zu Hause geblieben. We stayed at home. And this is interesting. The person does not move to a new destination. In fact, the whole meaning is that the person stays. But bleiben still uses sein. So this verb must be remembered as an important special case. Now let's take passieren, to happen. Its Partizip 2 is passiert, happened. For example, was ist passiert? What happened? Again, there is no clear movement from one place to another, and there is no ordinary activity with a direct object. But passieren builds the perfect with sein. Now we have one more important verb, begegnen, to meet someone by chance or to encounter someone. Its Partizip 2 is begegnet, met or encountered. For example, ich bin ihm gestern begegnet. I met him by chance yesterday. This verb can surprise learners. There is no obvious A to B journey in the sentence, but begegnen still uses sein. And one useful detail, the person we meet stands in the dative case. That is why
Estoy viendo un programa de alemán. Estoy estudiando. Suscríbete. No puedo porque ando estudiando. Pero en la próxima.
we say ihm, him, in this example. Now compare the four important verbs. Sein, gewesen, bleiben, geblieben, passieren, passiert, and begegnen, begegnet. They do not all fit neatly into the simple picture of movement to a destination. So don't force every verb into one rule. German sometimes says, just remember this one. And honestly, that is allowed. So learn these verbs as complete packages. The infinitive, the pat.
No sé. Ok. Pues hubo ciudades donde hubo muertos. En Cali, Pereira, no le fue muy bien.
Los daños extremos requieren una reparación extrema. El nuevo Pantene Molecular Bond Repair. Of movement to a destination. So don't force every verb into one rule. German sometimes says, just remember this.
Sí, eso
one.
vi que
And honestly,
Shakira está
that
aquí en
is
Colombia.
allowed. So learn these verbs as complete packages. The infinitive, the Partizip zwei, and the helper, sein. These four belong on your... Because sometimes the best grammar rule is simply, this verb uses sein. You've got it. Now we are ready for a very interesting detail. Some German verbs can build the perfect with haben, to have, or sein, to be. But this does not mean that we can choose whichever helper we like. The helper changes because the meaning or the use of the verb changes too. The same verb, two different situations, two different helpers. Let's look at the basic contrast. When the verb describes a journey or movement to a new place, we often use sein. But when someone controls something, uses something, or performs the action directly on an object, we usually use haben. Let's take fahren, to drive or to travel. Look at this sentence. Wir sind nach Berlin gefahren. We traveled to Berlin. Here, the verb describes a journey. The subject moves from one place to another.
No, yo siempre streameo constantemente. Me gusta streamear. Qué bueno, yo tengo un amigo que está en España.
There's a destination, nach Berlin, to Berlin. So we use sein. Now compare that with hat den Bus gefahren. He drove the bus. This time, the idea is different. The person is not simply being described as traveling somewhere. He is controlling a vehicle, and the vehicle, den Bus, the bus, is the direct object of the action. So now the same verb, fahren, uses haben. Notice what changed. The verb itself is still the same, but its role inside the sentence is different. In the first sentence, journey to a destination, so sein. In the second sentence, control or action on an object, so haben. We can see a similar idea with other verbs too. For example, fliegen, to fly. A person traveling to another place can use sein. But someone actively flying or operating an aircraft can use haben. So, the real lesson here is do not choose the helper verb only by looking at the infinitive. Look at how the verb is being used. Ask yourself, is this a journey or a real change of location? Then sein is often the right choice. Or is someone controlling something, using something, or acting directly on an object? Then haben is usually the right choice. This is why some verbs can appear with both helpers. The meaning changes, so the helper changes too. And this is important. Not every German verb can freely use both helpers. We're talking about a specific group of verbs whose meaning can work in different ways. So, remember the central idea. Movement or journey, sein. Control or action on an object, haben. Same verb, different meaning, different helper. Brilliant! Now let's zoom in on two very important verbs, fahren and fliegen. These two verbs are perfect examples of a special idea in German. The same verb can use sein or haben, depending on the meaning. So today, the big question is not only which verb, it is also what does the verb mean in this sentence? Let's begin with fahren, to travel or to drive. Look at the first sentence. Wir sind Berlin gefahren. We traveled to Berlin. Here, the sentence describes a journey. The subject moves from one place to another place. The destination is nach Berlin. So this use of fahren shows real movement to a new place. That is why the helper verb is sein. Now compare that with the second sentence. Hat den Bus gefahren. He drove the bus. This time, the idea is different. The sentence is not focused on a journey to a destination. Instead, it shows that the person controlled a vehicle. And we can see a direct object too, den Bus, the bus. So here, the verb is used more like an action performed on or with an object. That is why the helper verb is haben. So compare the two meanings of fahren. Journey to a destination, sein. Control of a vehicle or action on an object, haben. Now let's move to our second verb, fliegen, to fly. Look at this sentence. Sie ist nach Rom geflogen. She flew to Rome. Again, we see a journey. The person starts in one place and ends in another place. The destination is nach Rom. So this use of fliegen describes movement to a new place. That is why the helper verb is sein. Now compare it with der Pilot hat das Flugzeug geflogen. The pilot flew the aeroplane. Here, the meaning changes again. The sentence is not mainly about the pilot traveling somewhere. It is about operating the aeroplane. And once more, we have a direct object, das Flugzeug, the aeroplane. So in this use, the helper verb is haben. Now let's put the four sentences side by side. Wir sind nach Berlin gefahren. Journey, so sein. Hat den Bus gefahren. Control of a vehicle, so haben. Sie ist nach Rom geflogen. Journey, so sein. Der Pilot hat das Flugzeug geflogen. Control of an aeroplane, so haben. So what is the key lesson here? Do not choose the helper verb by looking only at the infinitive. Look at the meaning inside the sentence. If the verb describes movement to a destination, sein is often the right
No puedo que
choice.
estoy
If
estudiando.
the verb describes controlling something or acting on an object, haben is
Ahorita lo
usually
pongo.
the right choice. German is basically saying same verb, new meaning, new helper. And yes, sometimes German likes to keep us awake. So remember the shortcut like this. Journey or destination,
Vamos a ver. ¿Pero qué es eso? ¿Una canción?
Estoy aprendiendo inglés gratis en Duolingo. I love the beach.
mis comas Bennett, yo decido cómo cuidarme. Vinagre de manzana, complementando mi rutina. Colágeno para mantener.
Ya lo puse, ya lo puse. Sí, está buena. Está buena, pero no la puedo colocar así todo el tiempo porque me silencia en el en vivo, porque ese es copyright, si lo dejo. Por eso que lo quité. Pero está buena.
Haben is usually the right choice. German is basically saying same verb, new meaning, new helper. And yes, sometimes German likes to keep us awake. So remember the shortcut like this: journey or destination, sein. Control or direct object, haben. That's the difference with fahren and fliegen. Clear so far? Now let's look at another interesting group of verbs. Verbs like schwimmen, to swim. These verbs can sometimes appear with sein, to be, or haben, to have, depending on what the sentence is focusing on. The important contrast is direction or activity. Let's begin with clear movement toward a destination. Look at Wir sind ans andere Ufer geschwommen. We swam to the other shore. The phrase ans andere Ufer, to the other shore, shows a clear destination. The swimmers begin on one side, they move through the water, and they end at a different place. So the sentence describes a real change of location. That is why we use sein. The important picture is start point, movement, destination. Now compare that with a sentence focused on the activity itself. Wir haben eine Stunde geschwommen. We swam for 1 hour. Here, the important information is eine Stunde, for 1 hour. The sentence is not telling us where the swimmers ended up. The focus is on the activity and its duration. So in this activity-focused use, haben can be used. Now compare the two ideas. Ans andere Ufer.
Enterogermina te trae las nuevas Grumibiotics con probióticos, vitamina C, D y zinc para toda tu familia.
Nuevo tratamiento sin enjuagues Habitat. Aplica y listo. Nutrición y control de estrés.
Shows direction toward a destination, so sein. And eine Stunde focuses on how long the activity lasted, so haben can be used. The verb itself has not changed, the focus of the sentence has, and that difference can influence the helper verb. You may notice some variation with verbs like this in real German. German speakers do not always use every movement verb in exactly the same way, but for A2, this distinction is very useful. Clear direction to a new destination, think of sein. Activity or duration without a destination focus, haben, can be possible. So do not look only at the verb, look at the whole sentence. Ask yourself, where did the subject move to? If there's a clear destination, the sentence strongly points to sein. Or is the sentence mainly describing the activity itself, how long it lasted, or what someone was doing? Then haben may be used. That's the key idea with schwimmen and some similar movement verbs. Same action, different focus, different helper can be possible. So remember, direction to a destination, sein. Activity or duration, haben, can be possible. The whole meaning of the sentence makes the difference. Great progress! Now let's look at a very useful connection between related verbs. Sometimes you already know which helper verb the basic verb uses, and that can help you with verbs built from the same verb plus a prefix. The important idea is when the new prefix verb keeps the same basic meaning and the same type of movement, it usually keeps the same helper too. Let's begin with kommen, to come. In the perfect, this verb uses sein, to be. For example, ich bin spät gekommen. I came late. Now look at ankommen, to arrive. Its Partizip 2 is angekommen, arrived. The meaning is still connected with movement and arrival, so it also uses sein. For example, der Zug ist angekommen. The train arrived. Now take mitkommen, to come along. Its Partizip 2 is mitgekommen, come along. Again, the verb belongs to the same movement family. So we say, meine Freundin ist mitgekommen. My friend came along. So we can see a small verb family. Kommen, ankommen, and mitkommen. Different prefixes, but the same basic movement idea. And all three use sein. Now let's look at another useful family. Steigen, to climb or to rise. Its Partizip 2 is gestiegen, climbed or risen. This verb also uses sein. Now add some common prefixes. Einsteigen, to get in or to board, becomes eingestiegen, got in or boarded. For example, wir sind in den Zug eingestiegen. We got on the train. Now look at aussteigen, to get out. Its Partizip 2 is ausgestiegen, got out. For example, sie ist an der nächsten Station ausgestiegen. She got off at the next station. And finally, umsteigen, to change trains or connections. Its Partizip 2 is umgestiegen, changed trains. For example, ich bin in Berlin umgestiegen. I changed trains in Berlin. So, again, we have one verb family. Steigen, einsteigen, aussteigen, and umsteigen. The prefixes change the exact meaning, but the verbs still describe the same general type of movement. So they keep the same helper, sein. This gives us a very useful learning trick. When you meet a new prefix verb, look at the basic verb. If the new verb still belongs to the same meaning family, its helper often stays the same too. But be careful. This is a learning clue, not a rule you should apply blindly to every prefix verb in German. A prefix can sometimes change the meaning so much that the grammar changes too. German still likes a little independence. So remember the safe version. Same base verb, closely related meaning, same type of movement, very often same helper. That is why learning verbs in families can save you a lot of memorizing. Nice! Now let's turn everything we have learned into one clear decision path. When you need to choose between haben, to have, and sein, to be, do not guess. Ask a few questions about the meaning of the verb. Let's start with the first question. Does the verb describe a real movement to a new place? In other words, does the subject begin in one location and end in another? If the answer is yes, think of sein. For example, wir sind nach Berlin gefahren. We traveled to Berlin. There's a clear change of location, so this branch leads to sein. Now suppose there's no movement to a new place. Move to the next question. Does the verb describe a real change of state? Does the subject begin in one condition and end in a different condition? If the answer is yes, again, think of sein. For example, es ist kalt geworden. It became cold. The location does not change, but the condition does. So this branch also leads to sein. Now imagine the answer is no again. Ask the next question. Is this one of the important special verbs we already learned? For example, sein, bleiben, to stay, passieren, to happen, or begegnen, to meet someone by chance. These verbs are learned together with their helper, and that helper is sein. For example, wir sind zu Hause geblieben. We stayed at home. No journey, but this verb still belongs to the sein group. Now suppose none of those ideas fits. Then ask, does the verb describe an ordinary activity or does it act directly on an object? If the answer is yes, the sentence will usually use haben. For example, ich habe gearbeitet. I worked. That is an ordinary activity. And ich habe einen Film gesehen. I watched a film. Here, the verb has a direct object, einen Film, a film. Both paths lead to haben. So the decision path looks like this. Real movement to a new place, yes, sein. No, check for a change of state. Change of state, yes, sein. No, check the special verb group. Special sein verb, yes, use sein. If none of these applies and the verb describes an activity or takes a direct object, you will usually use haben. Now there's one important final check. Some verbs can change their helper when their meaning changes, like fahren, to travel or to drive, and fliegen, to fly. So with these verbs, look at the whole sentence. Journey or change of location, think sein. Control or action on an object, think haben. And with verbs like schwimmen, to swim, the focus can also matter. Clear direction to a destination, often sein. Activity or duration, haben, can be possible. So use the decision path as your map, but always keep the meaning of the whole sentence in view. The final shortcut is new place, sein, new state, sein, special remembered verb, sein,
¿Para qué?
ordinary activity or direct object, usually haben. And when the meaning changes, stop, look at the
No se trata de nada, solamente estoy estimando.
new place.
Panamá, un pequeño gran país. Descubre dos océanos interconectados por el Canal de Panamá. En el mismo viaje, cena una ciudad creativa gastronómica de UNESCO. Todo a solo un vuelo. Panamá, vive por más.
Espera, no le des skip. Esta historia vale la pena. Probablemente no has escuchado hablar de Yotomorochi, pero Liliana, a través de un celo, llevó sus artesanías hasta Suiza. ¿Conoce su historia? Aquí.
Con claro, puedes todo.
Sein, special remembered verb, sein, ordinary activity or direct object, usually haben. And when the meaning changes, stop, look at the whole sentence, then choose the helper. Brilliant. Now let's bring the whole lesson into one final clear map. By this point, we have seen that every perfect sentence needs a helper verb, and the big choice is haben or sein. So this slide is our Brilliant. Now let's bring the whole lesson into one final clear map. By this point, we have seen that every perfect sentence needs a helper verb, and the big choice is haben or sein. So this slide is our final comparison. Not a new rule jungle, more like a clean grammar map you can actually trust. Let's start with the biggest group. Most verbs use haben. This is the normal helper for activities